Laughed at my stepson's wedding exclusion. Now he's demanding an apology, but the family is divided, and I'm labeled a villain. I have been married to my husband for just over 20 years. We started dating when my stepkids were 5 and 3. Our kids are 5 from 13 to 20 IEs. Adam is getting married at the end of summer to his fiancée Alice, 27. We have all been very excited for them. All of the kids have roles for the wedding. Charles is the best man, the other 2 boys are groomsmen, and Ellie is a junior bridesmaid. Last weekend we had a dinner for my husband's birthday. All of the kids attended along with Alice. The topic of the wedding came up again, and this is where it started to go downhill. Ellie brought up that she was so excited to go dress shopping and that we planned to go to a bigger city in a few weeks to get her a dress and me a stepmom of the groom dress. At that, Alice looked at Adam sideways and responded that we only needed to worry about one dress, Ellie's. Ellie kind of laughed and said, "What are you expecting mom to wear? A suit?" Alice responded with, "My name isn't going. You know we are keeping our guest list very limited to only family and a few close friends." What? Adam and Alice have been to our house numerous times for holidays, dinners, just to say hi since they've been engaged. This has never been brought up. Pretty quickly things escalated. The Cliff Notes version is that Charles asked them to clarify if they were choosing to uninvite me now or if I was never invited. Alice confirmed the latter. Why? Adam said it's because I'm not his mom. Charles, David, and Ellie argued with Adam and Alice that none of them were going to go if I wasn't invited. That it was cruel to leave me out given I've been his parent for a majority of his life and loved him like my own. My husband and I admittedly sat there for a minute just fucking shocked. Adam finally turned to my husband and said, "Well?" My husband told him he wouldn't be going either. Adam then turned to me and asked if I was really going to let everyone ruin his wedding on my behalf. Here's where I might be the asshole. I just laughed. What came over me, but the entire thing was just so ridiculous that laughing was the only thing I could get out. I told my husband I'd be waiting in the car and left. And then promptly bawled my eyes out. Anyways, Charles, David and Ellie are not talking to Adam. Adam called my husband yesterday to try and smooth things over. He was still adamant I'm not invited and it's their wedding. He also requested I apologize for laughing at him. My husband told him tough shit. It's their wedding and they can invite whoever they want, but they can't control who will actually go. He said they owe me an apology and that Adam should be ashamed of himself. I'm getting texts now asking WTF I did and why I'm being a step monster and ruining the wedding Ida? Update 1. I want to clarify, I am not an affair partner. My husband did not cheat on his ex-wife with me. We met about a year after they divorced. She was already engaged, not to current stepdad, not that that really matters. 2. Ben was at the dinner, he is autistic. I went into it more in some of my comments, but he was very upset. He doesn't understand what the argument was exactly about, but he was mostly upset at Adam for saying I'm not their parent and then at all the siblings for fighting with each other. Anyways, the update. The short is, if you guessed it was related to Biomom, you were correct. I didn't want this to be the case. Adam rescheduled with Charles for Monday, citing Easter weekend. Fair enough. He also texted my husband to let him know that him and Alice would be doing Easter with her parents. We expected that. At some point on Sunday, Ellie texted Alice. I am not sure what exactly was said, but it prompted Alice to spill everything that was going on with her parents. I have met them a few times but they live a few hours away. They encouraged her and Adam to reach out to us to clear everything up. Monday we dropped Ben off to Biomom's. He stayed an extra night for Easter fun. A few hours later, she began to blow up my husband's phone as Ben mentioned the fight. My husband answered one call in which she was screaming and promptly hung up. He texted her that the siblings argued, everything is fine, and that if Ben has any further questions we will talk about when he's back with us. From some of the things she texted, we knew she was the root of all of this. Monday Adam also met up with Charles, and he did come clean. Charles texted us to see if it was okay if they came over after and we said yes. I'm not going to lie, Adam looked a mess. He immediately began crying and apologizing. The short and sweet is that he's been trying to mend bridges with Biomom. Their wedding isn't 60 people, it's blown up to about double that and they have been struggling to figure out how to pay for it. At one of their visits, Alice let it slip and Biomom jumped to help pay for things. It slowly snowballed from there from small requests to big requests. I am not sure what the final nail in the coffin was, but it ended with Biomom requesting I not be there. Adam said it was easier to hurt me and risk World War III with his mom. Alice's parents were less than pleased to find out how they've been with the wedding/budget, and even less so at Biomom's antics. They are trying to figure out how to start covering the payments Biomom has made. We've decided to help some with this. Adam also asked if we could meet again in a few days with Alice and we've said yes. There is still a lot of ground to cover for this to be close to mended. I am still hurt but mostly, I'm angry on behalf of my oldest son. Update 2. To catch everyone up really quick, Adam came over to have a convo with us after talking to Charles. He's been reconnecting with his mother over the last year and she's the real root of everything. It started with small requests as they got closer, then she's paying for things at the wedding, and escalated to me being uninvited. About a week after that, Adam and Alice came over for another convo. Husband and I read through all of your comments and already had a game plan. We explained that while we love them to bits and forgive them, This is still a big fuck up and they need to hold themselves accountable for 1. The mess with Biomom, and 2. How they treated me. It wasn't just about the dinner. It was also about the months they allowed ex-wife to shit talk me to them. We would not be bailing them out financially for this. I haven't pried into too many details, but Adam had a talk with his mom. She was calm and agreed to everything he said, suspicious. Mostly that they will not exclude me from future events or tolerate any unkind words about me moving forward. Him and Alice cancelled their wedding. They got back a good portion of their money, mostly to pay back Biomom. When he tried to drop off a check to her, she absolutely lost it. Adam hasn't wanted to talk much about the things that were said, but he has told us they are currently no contact. I won't say the exact date, but Adam and Alice asked us all to meet for dinner. We got there and Alice's parents/siblings were there too. It wasn't just dinner. They eloped. We got to go to the courthouse with them and then celebrate with them after. They seemed so happy. 3 days later, Hubs was at work and I was coming home from errands when I got a very panicked call from Ellie. Ex-wife was outside, pounding on our door and screaming her head off. I gave Ellie instructions and then called 911. I then called my husband. When I got there, ex-wife was already detained. She hadn't broken in but had damaged the outside of our door and the siding surrounding it. And she was still screaming. The stuff she was saying was absolutely vile and most of the reason I haven't wanted to update. It was everything from that she hates me and it's my fault Adam won't talk to her, to stealing my kids from me won't replace the ones you lost. After that comment I tuned out the rest until she was placed in the back of a cop car. It's important context but we've had several miscarriages, one of which I know ex-wife knew about. What I really think she was getting at is the baby we had in between David and Ellie, who was full term and stillborn. I still don't understand how anyone could say something so awful and carry so much hate. Putting it out there is hard and honestly I don't have much comment on it other than I'm lucky to have the husband I do. Some of the charges we declined to pursue, some the PD will be pursuing regardless if we ask them to or not. She is already bailed out but our restraining order has been granted pending a court date with the judge. From the bits and pieces we hear, ex-wife's family has put her on lockdown. Her brother works for the department that arrested her so this has been quite the talk of the town. We have not heard from her since, and her mother has told my husband we absolutely won't be hearing from her or having any other issues. We have been doing exchanges for Ben with stepdad. Update 3. Court was this week. I didn't sleep the night before, just lay there replaying the door, the siding, the screaming, and trying not to throw up. Ex-wife showed up in a white blazer like she was auditioning for Real Housewives and clutched a folder like it could erase a recording. Stepdad came with her and kept a full seat between them. I don't know if I've ever been more grateful for a stranger than I was for that judge. He listened to the 911 call, watched our neighbor's Ring footage with his jaw set, and when my husband played the short clip where she said that line about our baby, he went very still. He asked if I needed a break. I said no and immediately burst into tears, which was mortifying, but he was kind and handed me tissues and then, this was almost funny, told ex-wife's attorney to stop talking over me or he'd hold him in contempt. The order is in place for 2 years. She's barred from our home, my work, the kids' schools, and any direct or third-party contact with me and my husband. The judge told her, in that dry courtroom voice, that grief is not a license to set fire to other people. She tried to speak, her lawyer put a hand on her arm, and she stared dead ahead. On the way out she looked at me and it was like seeing someone I used to know through an aquarium. Stepdad caught up to my husband in the hallway and apologized, said she's agreed to an intensive outpatient program and is staying with her parents. He offered to pay for the door and siding out of his own pocket. We've already replaced both but we let him, and I think he needed to do it. The next part I didn't expect. Adam texted me 2 days later and asked if we'd come over for pizza with the kids. When we pulled up Alice's parents' SUV was out front and there were twinkle lights strung in the little crabapple in their yard. Adam had dragged their dining room table outside and Alice had flowers jammed into thrift store bud vases like a Pinterest board exploded. I started to ask what we could do and Alice just kissed my cheek and said, "Just be here." He did a thing. He stood up with a glass and he shook like a leaf the entire time. He apologized to me again, in front of everyone, and there was this moment where he couldn't get the word mom out and it made a knot in my throat big enough to choke a horse. Then he said, "I have been loved very well, for a very long time," and looked at me. He handed me a small box and it had a boutonniere pin in it, mother of the groom in tiny script, and I wasn't prepared for how hard that hit. I laughed and ugly cried all at once. He put on a stupid 2000 song I used to dance around the kitchen too, and asked if I would dance with him. Ben wedged himself between us about 15 seconds in and insisted on family hug dance and that's how we did it, 3 wide and off rhythm. Ben is doing better. He asked if the loud is gone now, which we translated into "Are we okay?" He sat with Adam on the porch steps and did a whole monologue about Sonic characters, and Adam just let him go, nodding, the way he used to when Ben was tiny and fixated on trucks. Before we left, Ben handed Alice a drawing where he'd labeled everyone by name with arrows, including me, and then he'd drawn a heart between Adam and Alice and under it wrote "Mary" and then "Happy Now" 3 times. Alice taped it to their fridge like it was the Mona Lisa. I don't want to paint it up like a movie. David still stiffens when Adam walks into a room. Ellie has a therapist appointment next week and I've got one the week after. There's a bruise where that night with ex-wife lives and it's not going anywhere fast. But we got something tender, and I'm holding on to it. One more bizarre thing, because of course there was. A florist delivery showed up in the middle of dinner with a massive spray of white lilies and ferns and a card that just said congratulations to my only son. Remember who your family is, Mom. Alice looked at me like, do we even? Adam walked it to the curb and set it on the lid of his trash bin. Then he came back to the table and asked Alice's dad if he still had that fire pit. 10 minutes later, the men were standing in the driveway with skewers and the biggest, dumbest grin, roasting marshmallows over a small blaze of lilies that smelled like a funeral parlor. It was petty and cathartic and various. We drove home smelling like smoke and sugar. When we got in, there was an envelope wedged under our mat. My stomach hit the floor, but it wasn't from her. It was from her mother, a handwritten note with a cashier's check covering the police fees we couldn't waive and a line that said, "I am so sorry for what you've endured. I loved your baby too." I sat on our stairs and cried again. My husband put his head on my knee and we just sat there, our empty house quiet in a way that didn't feel like a threat. Adam and Alice want to do a vow party at our place later this summer, nothing crazy, just tacos and a cake Ellie found from a bakery she swears is the cutest thing you've ever seen. I told him we'd talk to the judge to make sure we do it within the order and we'd warn the neighbors so no one calls 911 when the crabapple lights go up. He said he'd like me to say something during it. I told him I already did, and then I hugged him so hard he made a noise like a squeezed accordion and pretended to hate it. I am still mad. I am still hurt. But I can breathe in my house again, and my kids are under my roof right now, laughing at some dumb video in the living room, and the only pounding on our door is the rain. That will do for tonight. Update 4. We did the taco vow party. The sky did that moody teenager thing all afternoon, sulking and threatening, then brightened like it remembered it was June. Hubs climbed a ladder and zip-tied the crabapple lights while I yelled up that his back is not a suggestion, and Ellie floated through the kitchen in flip-flops and lip gloss, guarding a cake she swore was the cutest thing you've ever seen like it was a Fabergé egg. Ben set up the Bluetooth speaker and made a playlist that was every third song a Sonic theme and announced each one like a DJ. "This one is fast," he told Alice's dad very seriously, and 5 minutes later they were both doing a head bob thing on the deck that made me love them each a little more. We let the local PD know just so my heart didn't climb out of my mouth, and a cruiser rolled by once, while we were hanging the papel picado. The officer leaned out to say, "Everything good?" and left with a plate and a paper napkin balanced on his knee like he'd done it 40 times. It felt like a house again. People were everywhere. David stood with Charles by the grill with that fake aloof boy stance they've both perfected and argued about whether cilantro tastes like soap. Alice's mom slipped me her guacamole recipe like we were in a spy movie. The crabapple lights blew the breaker right at dusk and we all stood there with our phones in flashlight mode while my husband stomped down to the basement to fix it and came back up pumping his fist like he just defused a bomb. Someone put sparklers in the chimichurri. It was chaos, and it was good. Then Adam cleared his throat and did the glass clink and the air changed. He isn't a speech person. He does better in motion. My kid paced a little in place and looked down at his shoes and up at the tree and then at me, and it knocked the wind out of me how much of his 5-year-old face was still right there if you knew where to look. He apologized again, not the way you apologize when you've been told to, but the way you do when you've had to sit with your own choices in a quiet room. He didn't try to pretty it up. He said he had hurt me and let someone else drive a car that should have been his. He said he was going to spend the rest of his life getting good at the steering. Then he handed me a manila envelope and my hands shook so bad I almost dropped it. It wasn't a card. It was court forms. Petition for adult adoption. His name. My name. A little yellow sticky note stuck to the front that just said, "If you want to." He started talking before I could breathe. He didn't want to erase anyone, he said. He didn't want to pick a team. He wanted to make a legal thing out of the real thing that's been true since he was 3 and insisted I cut his sandwich in triangles not squares because that's the right way, Mom, and then looked like he'd said a curse word. He said he'd stood in a courthouse with me once for something monstrous and he wanted to stand in one with me for something good. I laughed. One of those ugly, hiccuping laughs that sounds like you're choking on a squeaky dog toy. I nodded so hard my head hurt. He came all the way over even though we were both crying and put his forehead to mine like he used to when he was little and hot with fever and I was the cold washcloth. Alice squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "We already looked up what we need. It's literally just a judge. We can do it." Her folks were crying. I looked over at David expecting that tightness I've been seeing in him and he was staring at Adam with his mouth tilted up on one side like he couldn't stop it. He said, "You absolute sap," which was a benediction. We did cake, and the bakery had put tiny sugar limes around the edge that made Ben lecture all of us about the difference between Persian and Key like a Food Network host. My husband made a toast that was mostly breath and throat noises and ended with, "To my wife, who builds a home that keeps surviving." The crabapple lights held. The next week we went back to the courthouse. Same building, same stale carpet smell, same chipped bench arm that catches on sweater sleeves. Different courtroom. Different judge. When he walked in, I realized I knew him. Same one from the order, and every hair on my arm stood up. He saw us and his face did something soft before his training corrected it. He let Adam talk. Adam did the pacing again, and he stumbled on the word mom and then just stood there in it and said it anyway. He talked about little things, the sound of my keys in the lock when I came home from a double, the time I sat in the school hallway with him instead of making him go into the talent show, the year we learned long division together like two raccoons fighting with a trash can. He said, "She's been in all my stitches and all my pictures, and I had to stare hard at the exit sign for a minute because otherwise I was going to turn into a puddle and slide under the table. The judge asked me if I wanted this. I said yes. I said I didn't realize how much I needed a word to catch all the things we've already been doing until it was sitting in my lap in government font." He smiled at that. He said, "I don't get a lot of afternoons like this," and signed. The sound the stamp made felt like something in my chest loosening. When we came out into the hallway, a couple in suits with 3 kids in matching polos cheered like we'd hit a home run, and Ben high-fived all of them and told them he's Adam's brother whether the paper said so or not, and now the paper does, so that's double brother, which is apparently a status. Adam laughed and put an arm around him and let himself lean. We went to the diner after. The waitress who's been there since before Ellie was born brought extra pickles and called me mama like she always does, and this time I felt it like a warm stone in my pocket I could carry around. 2 things I didn't expect. Stepdad texted my husband later that night. He said he heard, and that he was proud of Adam, and that he hoped this new shape holds. He apologized again for what happened in our yard. He told us he's got eyes on her and she's still doing the program. He asked if he could tell his folks, because they will care in the right way, and I said yes. And then, when we got home, there was a flat of peony starts sitting on our porch with a little card from ex-wife's mother. "No check this time, no penance. Just, for all your summers. Plant them where you can see them from the kitchen." We did, at dusk, my husband on his knees in the dirt and me with the hose and Ellie holding her phone flashlight like an operating room nurse. The crabapple branch creaked above us. The soil let go easy. We smelled like clean earth for the first time in a while. I pinned the mother of the groom pin to the corner of the adoption order when we got inside because I'm sentimental and ridiculous and also, apparently, some kind of magpie. It looks a little dumb and exactly right. There are still sharp edges. The order is a wall we can lean on, not a gate that erases the past. David still has days where his jaw is a line. Ben still asks if the loud is sleeping and we tell him yes, for now, and we mean it. But tonight there are tacos in Tupperware in the fridge and a muddy footprints trail from the peony bed to the sink, and Adam texted me a picture of his framed copy with the caption officially the most dramatic middle child move of all time. I told him he was worth the paperwork and he sent back 17 heart emojis and then a meme of a raccoon stealing a quesadilla, which is probably the right note to end on. The house is quiet in the way that means everybody is here. The crabapple lights are off. The peonies are in the ground. I can breathe. Update 5. The peonies took the assignment. Little red fists up through the mulch like they were late to something and mad about it, and every time I come down the back steps with coffee I check them like a hen. The crabapple lights are still coiled in the garage like sleeping snakes, and my husband has promised me he will not climb anything taller than a chair until at least October. He lies. 2 Fridays ago Adam texted lasagna practice? Like they were training for the Carb Olympics, and when we walked in the whole dining table was empty except for a key lime pie sitting dead center like a UFO. Alice had piped something on it in shaky cursive and there was powdered sugar on her shoulder and on Adam's belt like he'd lost an argument with a bag. I leaned in and read it and forgot what my hands were doing and put both palms in the pie. "Grandma," it said, in tiny sweet letters that looked like they might float away. I made a sound that did not belong to any animal I've ever met. My husband bark laughed once and then just held onto the back of a chair with both hands and bent over like someone had unplugged his knees. Ben clapped and shouted, "Our family is acquiring a baby." Which is his tone of voice for new Sonic releases. Ellie put both hands to her mouth and did a little hop like a startled bird. David, God bless him, hid his smile like it owed him money and said, "You absolute saps," which has become as close to a family blessing as we get. We ate pie with our fingers because mine were already in it. Alice cried and then laughed and apologized for crying, and I said if she didn't cry I'd be worried. Adam couldn't sit. He kept getting up and getting more napkins and then realizing he'd already brought a whole roll of paper towels and then standing there with his hands doing nothing and me watching that motion go through his body like a wind and thinking, okay, it's landing. Ben asked 100 questions in the car home. Will the baby like garlic bread? What is the decibel of a baby? Is this baby a winter? He wanted to know if he would be an uncle or a brother and we told him both and he said, double status achieved, very seriously, and then fell asleep upright, his head against the window, mouth open, one hand still in a fist. The next week was a jelly of small errands that suddenly felt like they had a hum to them. We sat in the OB waiting room with a potted plant in our laps because apparently I bring the wrong thing to medical appointments now. Alice squeezed my fingers until my knuckles whispered, and when that little heartbeat came on the screen it sounded like a hummingbird trapped in a shoebox, frantic and sure of itself, and everything in me stood up. Adam put both hands to his face. The tech looked at me and said, "Grandma?" And I said yes and felt that word find a shelf in me and sit down. We had a scare last Tuesday night because of course we did. It was one of those mean little things that happens in a body and feels like the end of the world because your muscle memory knows what it is to lose something. Alice called, voice flat in that way that only happens when you've decided you will not fall apart until later. We threw on shoes and ran. The ER was doing its midnight hum. Ben paced the length of the vending machines and narrated each snack option like a museum docent. Adam wore a path into the linoleum. I sat very still so that nothing would tip. It was okay. It was okay. A doctor with the same calm voice as our judge from before, different man, same exact tone, said those words and I let my whole spine go. They let me stick my head in for the second ultrasound and I watched that flicker again and thought I will carry you in my teeth if I have to. On the way out we passed stepdad in the hallway and for a second all my systems did a fire drill. He had a paper cup of coffee and eyes like he hadn't slept in a week. He didn't come near us. He just put his hand flat to his chest and nodded once and I nodded back and kept walking because some doors are closed for a reason. He texted my husband later that night, "Heard you were there, didn't want to make it weird, she's still in the program, I'm sorry you had to see me." It wasn't weird. Or it was, but in that way where two people from the same storm stand under the same awning and pretend it's a bus stop. A week after that there was a knock at our door in the good way. I looked through the peephole and saw stepdad on the porch with a banker's box tucked under his arm like a basketball. He was alone and he didn't step onto the welcome mat. He asked if my husband would come out. I stood in the hallway and listened to the timbre of their voices through the wood. Then my husband brought the box inside and set it on the dining table and I put my hand over the lid and then took it off. It was Adam's baby book. It smelled like closets and daycare paste. The first page had the hospital bracelet taped down with brown scotch tape and Adam's actual hair in an envelope that made me squeamish and also cry. There were pictures of a kid I didn't know yet, and then there were pictures of a kid I did. One from a field day where his shoelaces were double knotted and I remembered which of my fingers did it. One taken in our kitchen early on, the paint still terrible, him on a stool with a whisk, flour everywhere, and my shoulder in the corner of the frame. He must have tucked that one in later. Between two stiff cardstock pages was a Valentine cut crooked and written in pencil, "To Mom," spelled right, and a second later in different pencil, "To, my name, Mom also." The breath left me. My husband put his hand on my back and just left it there. There was a letter on top, sealed, Adam's name on it in her handwriting, and I hated that my body still knew that loop. We didn't open it. We put it in a Ziploc like it was evidence and then into the drawer with our passports. Adam came later and put his hand on the envelope and didn't pick it up. He said, "Not right now," and looked at me like he wanted permission to say that out loud and I nodded. We can do things in the right order. We can refuse other people's emergency. Two quieter things made me laugh out loud this week. Adam sent me a screenshot of his dentist portal. Emergency contact, me. It dinged my phone at 10:14 p.m., a little cartoon tooth under my name, and I sat there in bed with my phone lit up and did that ridiculous thing where you hold a screen to your chest. And then, we went to the DMV because of the adoption paperwork and the clerk behind the plexiglass was a woman who has watched me fail my parallel parking twice when I was 26. She stamped something and looked up and said, "Mom, sign there," and then, deadpan, "Not your first rodeo." I told her I was in the rodeo for life and she snorted so hard her glasses fogged. Alice's parents are building a crib in their living room because they cannot not. Ellie is crocheting something that will either be a blanket or a trapezoid with aspirations of being a blanket. David wandered into the baby aisle at Target with me and pretended he was there ironically and then spent 10 minutes inspecting the engineering of a stroller like he was going to design one. Ben told the cashier at the grocery store we are expecting an infant drop and the cashier cheered and then cried and then accidentally charged us twice for broccoli. It was one of those days when everybody is slightly ridiculous and it made the air feel light. I am not pretending everything is tidy. The order is still on the fridge. The peonies will still get aphids. There is a letter in a drawer that I am not reading yet because I want to be a person who reads it in a room with a couch and a box of Kleenex and enough sleep. But this afternoon I pinned that little mother of the groom script pin to the corner of the ultrasound printout and stuck the magnet onto the side of the fridge where the light hits at about 4. The crabapple threw little dappled shadows over the sink. Ben stuck a Sonic sticker on the Ziploc we've designated for baby receipts and announced he is the CFO of Tiny Things. My husband announced the breaker is holding steady like he was the captain of a ship and then asked if I could please stop telling him not to climb things because it makes him think about climbing them. I can stand in my kitchen and see the peony bed from the window. They're taller now, little fists gone open, leaves catching the gold part of the day. I leaned on the counter and listened to my family do the same old arguing about cilantro and sonic speeds and the ethics of buying a onesie that says born to nap and thought, this is the loud I can live with. The other loud feels farther away. The baby's heartbeat was a tiny hammer on a tin roof and I keep hearing it, steady and particular, and for the first time in a long time every part of me isn't braced. We have a little person coming. I am, apparently, ridiculous, because when I told Adam goodnight I called myself Grandma out loud and he grinned like he'd been waiting for me too. He kissed my hair and called me a sap. I'll take it. The house is quiet in the way that means there is going to be noise again. The crabapple lights are still asleep. The peonies are almost at the window. I can breathe and it smells a little like limes.